Hi guys, welcome back to Purpose Meets Class, and today we are rocking the natural. But anyway, so today's video is titled Please Mind the Gap. If you're from London, or if you've been to London, you'd understand that before you step on the underground, you'd understand that there's a little gap between the platform and the train, and usually you hear it out loud. This lady who usually says, please mind the gap. You hear it even before getting on a normal train as well. So today's video has been inspired by that, the underground, and Sarah Jakes Roberts. She did a video last week. Guys, if you have not watched this video, you need to go watch it now. It's called Promise Problems. Honestly, I love this message. It's one of those that I know I'm going to listen to over and over again. If you haven't watched it, you guys need to go watch it. Search One Church LA here on YouTube. Guys, it is amazing. Like, honestly, after I watched it, I was like, wow. Like, wow. Okay, so I'm gonna start by defining the gap, and I think the best way to describe the gap for me is after you left but before you arrive, or after the old but before the new. I think you guys can kind of see where I'm going with this. And basically I wanted to do a video about the gap, what it feels like being in the gap, what it means to be in the gap. And this is usually after God has told you something, after God has promised you something, you've kind of set off, you're on your way, but then you're like in this weird area, this weird space where things are going well, but things are also not going well at the same time, and you're not where you want to be. So it's like this space which kind of makes or breaks you, and you can either kind of look forward and think, okay, that's where I want to go, or you can look back and go backwards. For me, I sometimes view the gap as something negative. I think most of us would do, because it's kind of like no man's land. Yeah, you're not who you used to be, but you're kind of not who you want to be. So it's kind of like this confusing time. So I think words that could describe the gap are confusing, frustrating, lonely, isolated, what else? And at times being in the gap, it kind of like forces us or pushes us to want to fix the problem by ourselves. I think that's one of my biggest struggles anyway. When I'm going through anything, the first thing I want to do is figure out how I can fix the problem. What can I do to fix this problem? And 9 out of 10 times, nothing. I can't do anything. I just have to trust God. I just have to wait on Him. I have to just keep believing in Him and let Him do what He does best. So I'm going to read from Genesis 2. So I'm going to read from Genesis 15, 2 to 6. You guys don't understand how many times I've had to do that. So yeah, okay, let's go. But Abraham said, Lord God, what will you give me, seeing as I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? Then Abraham said, look, you have given me no offspring. Indeed, one born in my house is my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, this one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir. Then he brought him outside and said, look now towards the heaven and count the stars if you're able to number them. And he said to him, so shall your descendants be. And he believed in the Lord, and he accounted it to him for righteousness. So this is the story about Abraham and God. And obviously we know that Abraham did not have a child. So God promised him that you're going to have a child who's going to be your heir. And then it took him outside to visually show him exactly what he was saying, that, you know, if you can count the number of the stars, this is as many as your descendants will be. So, okay, the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that God spoke to Abraham so clearly. Like, he didn't even speak in riddles. But it's so funny how long it took for this to come to pass and what happened in the gap. Okay, so altogether it took about 25 years. So that's just almost as old as me, my entire life, for them to have the child that God had promised them. So these are the 3 things not to do between God telling you something and you reaching your promised land. So the first thing is, do not complain. I know this is probably one of the hardest things not to do. It's just, I don't know, it's so natural for us to complain. Like, it's easier for us to talk about something than to do something about it. The more you complain, the more it kind of like escalates the situation, or the more it reminds you of the things that are not happening, the things that God has promised you. And instead of complaining, I think that we should use it as a time to seek God. So switch your complaining for seeking. Sometimes we go through this delay and we feel this gap, or we stay in this gap because sometimes we may not actually be ready for what God has promised us. So this is a great time for you to seek. What are the characteristics that are within me that can change? What are the things around me? What are the people around me can I touch in this gap, in this phase, before I move on to the next stage of my life? I feel like whatever stage that we're in our lives, if you find that you're you're still in that same space, if you're hovering that same problem, if you're hovering that same situation, you have to think that there's got to be something that I'm not learning. There's got to be something I haven't got yet. Like, why is God delaying this process? Why is he slowing this down? It could be a thing about faith. It could be a thing about trust, about patience. It could be anything. And instead of you complaining about why it hasn't happened yet, it's probably the best time for you to seek God. The second thing not to do in the gap is to compare. It's so easy to compare, especially with people that are the same age as you, people that are around you, people that are in the same industry as you. It's like, especially here on YouTube, I'll give you an example. It's so easy to compare and be like, wait, she just started her channel like, 2 months ago. How is she doing so well? How has she got so many views? How is she popping so much compared to somebody who's been on YouTube for like 5 to 10 years? And I think once you get to that place of comparison, and I'm sure you guys have heard this before, but comparison is the thief of joy, because it's like now you've set your standard to be whatever they are, when God probably has a standard that is higher than whatever they're doing. And once you start comparing and you set them as the benchmark, you kind of actually limit yourself. You limit what God actually has called you to do. And I think that, especially with something like this, when you're sharing the word on YouTube, I've always said to myself, it's better than 10 people watch this video and 9 of them are saved, or 9 of them are inspired, or plant a seed in at least 9 people, than 1,000 people to watch this video and literally nobody gets anything from it. It's pointless. It doesn't mean anything. So I'd rather have little views but a bigger impact than a lot of views and no impact at all. So instead of comparing, I encourage you to pray. It's so hard. I know it's so hard, especially when you can see people just like getting this deal, doing this, they've now done this, the video's popped, it's gone viral, Pray. Just as soon as you start to compare yourself with anybody, pray. The only standard that you should have is Jesus. The only person you should try to compare yourself to or become like is Jesus, nobody else in this world. Okay, the last thing not to do in the gap is to compete. Comparing and competing are kind of like on the same level, but sometimes I feel like if you compare and not do anything about it, it can just be a mental thing. But the problem kicks in when you compare and then you try to compete with that person. And I'm reminded of Sarah. There was now a second woman in their life, and that was Hagar. And I feel like to some extent Sarah began to compare herself to Hagar, because Hagar had a child and now she was thinking, okay, she's getting all the attention, what can I do to get my husband's attention back, blah 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 blah. It all became such a big mess. Basically what Sarah tried to do was to go ahead of God, was to try and fix the problem by herself, which kind of backfired. So instead of competing, instead of comparing, I think you should switch that for preparing, because if you're not where you want to be yet, there's still more work to be done. So I posted the other day on Instagram about if your mindset is towards success, if your mindset is towards receiving something, I think that before that thing comes, you need to be ready for it, you need to be prepared for it. So instead of you competing, comparing, whatever, complaining, prepare. The way that I see it is that before God gives you the stage, before God gives you the platform, you need to be ready. So this is what you can spend your time doing in the gap. It's pretty pointless for God to be like, okay, here you go, here's the platform, speak to 10,000 people every single day. Like, that's a scary thing. Like, when I think about it, even being on YouTube, sometimes it scares me, because you have influence. Everybody influences people in one way or another. So if I'm going to be a person of influence, I want to make sure that I'm completely prepared. So when God gives me an even bigger stage, that I'm ready for it. I'm ready to like go for it and do what he's called me to do. I know that we can get to that place as well as human beings where it feels like what God promised me 10 years ago just isn't happening. But don't stop believing. Don't stop believing. But yeah, don't stop believing and don't lose the faith. Like, the last thing you want to be doing is losing your faith, because that's what the devil wants. The devil wants you to start thinking, oh, you're alone, you've been abandoned, you're in isolation, or nothing's gonna come out of this, nothing's gonna come out of this dry bones, nothing's gonna come out of this dry land, and nothing's gonna happen, basically. But that's what the devil wants us to think, and that is not the truth. So I just want to encourage you guys that in this dry season, in this quiet isolation season, that you keep seeking, you keep praying, and you keep preparing, because whatever God has promised you, it's gonna come, and you need to be ready for when that thing arrives. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.